Ready to go? Okay.
Is that okay?
Good evening, everyone. Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Judy Friedman. I am the temporary assistant field aide to Supervisor Gustafson for another week or so. And I want to welcome you to tonight's town hall. Supervisor Gustafson felt it was important to get some of the information out to the community in a town hall format. So here we are. Of course, it's being held via Zoom, consistent with California's executive order. And I'm going to ask Kelly to go through how people, if you do have questions or comments after the presentations, I'll open it up for that for a moment. And if you do have something to say, Kelly's going to explain how to comment.
So if you joined us via computer, you can click the raise my hand button. It should be at the bottom, middle, center of your screen. You can also type a question in the chat, or you can use the question and answer function as well. If you joined us via phone, it looks like we have one caller so far. You press *9 to raise your hand. So feel free to raise your hand in the presentation and we will call on you when it's your turn and unmute you, and you will be able to speak.
With that, I'm going to introduce Supervisor Cindy Gustafson for the introduction and welcome and some general county updates. Supervisor Gustafson.
Thanks, Judy. And thanks everybody for joining tonight. Looks like we have a lot of attendees and we really appreciate you taking the time out to participate in the town hall. You know, the county, as I've said throughout this, well, all of us in public service, really, all the local agencies and districts, everybody's been extremely busy since March and the start of this pandemic. And a lot of efforts underway. And I just wanted to have an opportunity to give you updates tonight and also encourage participation in some upcoming meetings and processes. So with that, thanks again for joining us tonight, and wanted to go through some updates for all of you. I think most of you are aware, like many areas of the country and the state, our county has seen increasing cases of COVID-19 over the last several weeks. We have moved into the red zone. We did try to adjudicate that for some circumstances that we thought were worth an adjudication. The state didn't agree with us and has moved us into the red as of Tuesday. But in the last 9 days, the numbers are even worse and now put us in what could be considered the range for our cases per 100,000 moving into purple. And so I continue to urge everybody to please take precautions, wear face coverings, and really let's try to limit these cases and try to stay with some of our businesses open. Especially right now, I was just talking to someone earlier today who doesn't have any hope of right now when Congress will allocate any more PPE programs, any payroll programs, and what's left in unemployment is sometimes taking weeks and months for people to secure. So really dire circumstances for those who are put out of work when we have to start shutting down businesses again. The good news for Eastern Placer County is for at least the last 3 days, we haven't seen any new cases. And I spoke with the hospital this afternoon. They only have one Placer County resident hospitalized with COVID right now up here. But a lot of the cases are occurring down in the western end of the county. The good news is that while the number of cases and positive tests are going up, the severity of cases doesn't seem to be as bad yet. And I always want to knock on wood when you say that, but the bad news is it's creating quite a bit of divisiveness in the community already again. And I just really urge us to be empathetic and try to take care of one another and take care of ourselves. It's clear to me the science says that masks are good for you, they're good for me, they're good for everybody. It's such a small thing to do to try to help keep us open. So I know I see great compliance up here. When I do have to go down the hill to meetings, maybe I see a lot less of compliance with face coverings. And I just hope that we can get everybody participating and taking care of our community in that way. We did have our Board of Supervisors meeting last 2 weeks ago now in Tahoe, and quite a few Tahoe items were on that agenda. I urge you to look at the video of that, look at the agenda, and you can click and listen to the dialogue. And probably I'll recap them real quick to tease you into looking at those, but I don't have time to replay a 7-hour meeting right now. But you can watch it at your leisure, especially if you want to fall asleep at some point. We did a great job of, I hope, commending Larry Sevison for 50 years of service to Placer County. And he's just done an incredible job. He isn't done serving Placer County, but earlier this year, he signed over TRPA as well as California Tahoe Conservancy. I sit on both of those boards now. Larry still remains our Eastern Placer County Commissioner, Planning Commissioner. But we recognized him for so many other things that he's done in the community and his service there. The following day, the TRPA Governing Board also recognized him for his almost 25 years of service there. So that was really a great commendation. And we agreed to name the Dollar Creek Trail, which for those of you who don't know, I think Larry spent a good 30 years working to secure funds and get that project moving forward. Relentless in his efforts there. And so we're going to put a boulder and name that the Sevison Trail. And I think that was really moving to his family and to Larry. He really appreciated that. We also took action to rename Coon Street, Raccoon Street. We also had updates on short-term rental enforcement, the traffic management programs that we initiated this summer, litter and trash augmented services that we provided this summer, a lot on transportation, not only with our Resort Triangle Transportation Plan, but I would urge all of you to look at TRPA's Highway 89 Corridor Management Plan and also their Regional Transportation Plan. There's a lot going on in the transportation arena, and your public comments are really vital to those efforts and making sure you get your input in on those. Also at the board meeting, we did some workforce housing. We had a report on the workforce housing preservation program, including our deed restriction program. Great efforts that staff have been putting forward to kind of duplicate the programs, the program that Vail talked to us about, 2 years ago now. And really exciting opportunity with the county investing some money in buying deed restrictions, buying infrastructure so that local workforce can live here in the community. And we also allocated an additional $5 million of CARES Act funding to businesses and nonprofits for relief during COVID. And that new $5 million program went live today. Applications for businesses are due by the 20th. And I urge you to go on our website. Perhaps Judy or Kelly can put the link in the website so that people who might have some of our larger businesses that were exempted the first time have the opportunity to apply this time. We also reported that, and as of today, I believe we closed escrow on the purchase of the Seven Pines Motel. This is the motel that sits right behind the community house in Kings Beach. It will provide 14 units of permanent supportive housing with an on-site manager, and we will purchase that property, and AMI Housing will be the owner operator for 55 years of that property. So it will be under public ownership. We need to do some improvements on the property, but it has been used as long-term housing already, and we're transferring it into a program with on-site management and using state dollars to encourage that. It's again, keeping people out of becoming homeless and getting the services they need right next door and through on-site programming. So we're really excited about that. We had to move very quickly on that once we found it was available, and the state, we were one of very few programs across the state that received that funding. So it was a great boost to our services. It's the first time we'll have those services anywhere on the eastern slope of either Nevada or Placer County, and we will be working with Eastern Nevada County to make use of this as well. Those individuals are in our community and need our assistance. And then wanted to make mention that talking to Ryan Ronco, our director, our county, what's his title? Elections and everything else, county recorder and elections. We have about 25,000 votes left to count in the county. He is posting those updated totals at 4:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. I don't know, he was hoping to be done tomorrow with the last posting, but there are provisional ballots, about 3,500 that may take into next week to go through. So we're getting close to having final results. There are some very close case races down in the city of Auburn and some other areas. So I know we have a lot of candidates down on the western part of the county waiting to hear anxiously. I don't think it'll make much of a difference up here in anything that was being voted on. And then budget workshop this Tuesday, we had a very detailed budget workshop in preparation for the 2021 budget for the county. And some of the statistics I wanted to share with you if you didn't watch that meeting because you were busy at work or busy with life. We heard what our current unemployment rates are, which are about double what they were a year ago. Not as high as they were in April of this year, but currently in September, with the last month that we had statistics for, we already had double the unemployment that we had a year ago. So that's significant numbers and very impactful to our local residents who are trying to put food on the table for their families and the community and their participation in our community. The sales tax revenues for last year were down about 2.5 million, and the lion's share of that, almost 46% of that was from casual dining establishments. So a huge amount of revenue in sales tax down. Online purchasing and sales tax was up, but certainly our local collections were down. And TOT was down about 4 million countywide. Again, pretty significant numbers and not surprising given all the restrictions that we had earlier in the year. And then other county funding, I won't go through all of those, but there's a number of factors. So in other funding that we received from the state that was also reduced. And so in looking at all those factors, the budget moving forward is a very conservative budget. We are hopeful that so much of our budget is reliant on property tax revenue, which obviously I think we all believe is escalating up here, but really throughout the county, we're seeing people migrate out of the more urban Bay Area into the foothills and other areas. So we're not the only ones experiencing growth in property tax revenue. And so we're hopeful that that will remain stable as the lion's share of our general fund does depend on the property tax. And then I wanted to mention a few upcoming meetings that we have. The Tahoe Transportation District meets tomorrow, and I serve as chair on that board. And for those of you not paying attention to those agendas either, one of the items that will be talked about that you might find interesting is that TTD was asked to conduct a feasibility study of moving the Caltrans yard out of the river corridor and looking at alternative locations. So that feasibility study will be presented tomorrow. So that might be of interest to some of you to look at that. I know from my years of working on the community plan back in the late 80s, we always wondered why the entrance to town was our industrial zone, entrance to Lake Tahoe, and looking at how ways we could improve it. So that's being discussed tomorrow morning. And then the Board of Supervisors has a meeting again next Tuesday. I think this is our 5th one in a row. Usually we go every other week, but we've done 5 weeks in a row because there is so much going on between COVID, budget, and projects. So lots of updates there. And then TRPA meeting next Wednesday. Not a lot of specifics on any projects there, but a long-term vision for TRPA is going to be discussed and kind of moving forward on the strategic issues that TRPA is looking at, and obviously including transportation and housing are critical to that. And then Judy wanted me to remind everybody that those of you who know about it, we used to have a thing called a breakfast club that met the first Tuesday of every month at Grand Lebacan Resort. It will be going virtual next Tuesday. The Resort Association will be hosting that. I'm sorry, not next Tuesday, December 1st. And there'll be updates there as well. So lots of opportunities. All of these meetings have opportunity for public input. And I really urge those of you interested in any particular topics to read through the agendas and provide input either directly to me or through at the meetings. And certainly I, as your representative on those other boards, would be happy to carry those messages forward. So that was really quick. I know we have other items to get to, but I'm happy to answer questions, Judy, if you want to open that up to questions.
So there are a couple of questions. One of them has to do with if you could explain the metrics that go into us changing tiers. And the other one has to do with, and I think this is David Stepner. Are there are there circumstances that could cause the ski areas to close?
Well, I'll start with trying to explain the metrics. There's 2 metrics that are primarily used, but there's really 3 metrics. So one is the adjusted case rate, rate per 100,000 of population. And it's an average of 7 days, and there's a 7-day lag. So talk about getting confusing. The state is always 7 days behind what you're reading on our boards when you see our Placer County reports. So they don't mirror each other. And our case rate, and Kelly, maybe you can pull it up because I don't have both my screens up here. I think our rate now is upwards of 8.something% per 100,000. The tiers can be found at on California's website, Blueprint for a Safer Economy. And orange, we could have had up to 3.9 cases per 100,000. We went into red when we got above 4. And when I say that we're edging toward purple, it's because now we're a little over 8 in cases per 100,000 of population. Was I close, Kelly, with 8 point?
We were 8.5 yesterday,
Uh-huh.
this morning, and then 9.2 was the latest that came out.
Right. Thank you. And so just like many other areas of the state that have already gone into purple, it's likely, unless we can make a dramatic response to this, that we're going to see spread into purple. Most of the cases that we're able to contact trace are related to family gatherings or large group gatherings. And then there's an awful lot who don't know where they where they got it, but and within family groups is where we've seen a lot of spread. The other metric is testing positivity. In that metric, we're doing well. We're in the orange category, which is where we were a few weeks ago. While that has been going up, we also have invested a lot at the county in testing capacity. And so we're running a lot more tests. That has been one of the bones of contention that some of my peers on the board have been concerned about, because the more you test, even some asymptomatic people may get tested and find out they're positive. Now we know they're positive, and it goes against us in our cases per 100,000 people. They might not have known that before. But while we're doing, those two are the two main state metrics. The third one that the state is putting a lot of emphasis in, and I did early on because we had so much of a caseload in the Kings Beach community early in this, and continue to have a lot of cases in Kings Beach, was the equity focus. What are you doing for those who have to go to work, those who live in multi-generational homes and in dense living situations, and they have to go to work? What are you doing to protect those? And we've made great strides with the help of our the Sierra Community House programs and our Health and Human Services group, our Latino, I forget the name of our group that helps us with our Latino community, both in the western end of the county and in the eastern end of the county. So they've really helped keep us in a really good standing on that metric. That doesn't move us, but it can keep us from moving up if we're not meeting that equity standard. Right now, our equity levels are in good shape with the rest of our population, meaning those that are in the lowest demographic group of income are as healthy as the rest of us. So that's the good news there. I know there's a lot more to describe. The blueprint for a safer economy is on the California website, and I urge you to read it. It's very interesting to read all the statistics and how they calculate this, because it's adjusted by the number of cases, how much testing we have, as well as the number of cases. So it's not a one-for-one. If you're testing more, you get a bit of a higher caseload given to you. So it's adjusted down, if that makes sense. And then the other one, I have no idea, David. I know the ski areas have had a number of calls with Dr., or at least several calls with Dr. Oldham. And right now, it doesn't appear that anything on outdoor recreation would be shut down. From my understanding, it's indoor activities. Indoors appears to be the focus. And if we go into purple, it would be all internal dining would be shut down. It would be only takeout food. The ski areas, I think, are preparing that food is to go and take out and hopefully be able to stay open. Now, I don't know what that means for gondolas. I don't know what it means in those areas, but I know they're working on alternatives, solutions over what they would do. So sorry, I don't know more. I do need to catch up with both Deidre and Ron and see where they're at in their planning stages.
A couple more questions that are COVID related, and then we're going to move on. One of them is there something that we could have done a little bit differently when the restrictions were loosened? It's always a good question in hindsight. And then Ann Nichols asked an interesting question that I know has been discussed before, given that this side of the county and this side of Nevada County and this side of the El Dorado County as well is a little bit different than the rest of the counties that are causing some of our numbers to shift.
Okay, well, on the first one, I'm sure what we would all say is it would have been great if we'd had leadership. And my personal belief is we should have had leadership at the federal level that was telling us that face masks are okay to wear and that we should wear them, and we shouldn't have this divisiveness as if it's a right not to take care of your community. I mean, you know, that's my point of view. I think that even within our own Board of Supervisors, there's a sense of a bit of a disagreement on face coverings, but all the science is there. All the experts are telling us that's the case, that wearing face coverings works. Other than that, I don't know how much more we couldn't create a bubble around ourselves to exclude us from what's happening throughout our country. We still are in far, far better shape than so many of our urbanized areas in the country. And I think we're fortunate to live in a place where we can get out and get fresh, healthy air and not be crammed in other types of facilities. So We early on went after the increases that we were seeing in Kings Beach community because we were aware of the demographic and educational differences, and making sure we had all of our materials translated and that we were providing free PPE and masks and hand sanitizer through the community house program with the meals that they were delivering and providing for folks. So I think we've done a great job there. And as well, on Ann's question, a number of local businesses have asked me about that. And in fact, I have some meetings tomorrow to discuss it further. To this point, the state has not let portions of any county segregate themselves out. There may be a case that the Sierra, because of the geography, because of, we really don't do business in Auburn. Most of us, other than me, have to go to Auburn very often. And most of us are doing more of our business shopping. Our workforce is coming from Reno, if anything, not from Western County. But if you look at Reno's numbers, they're worse than we are. So, I think the issue is we can't close our borders. We can't put a bubble around us. And if we could segregate our numbers out and try to establish different thresholds, I think it would be good for us to be more nimble in responding to issues, but I don't know that it would have helped anything in our caseloads. Our numbers would still probably have us going into red and maybe even into purple just on our own because our population is so small up here.
Megan asks a question, if the county's looking at any other properties for the Home Key program.
Not up here, but we pursued several down on the other side of the county. But that's the only one that seemed to fit to their criteria, that already had residents in it that needed and could partake in the services, that were already clients of Health and Human Services. So they were already receiving those services. So there were a lot of criteria that went into making that quick decision. Would that be an appropriate place?
So we're going to move on. And everybody, Kelly has put the link for Placer Shares in the chat, and also for the Board of Supervisors meeting that the supervisor referred to earlier. So the links are
Judy,
there.
we have one hand raised. Do you want to take that raised hand?
I think that was Kevin, and when I think we answered his question.
Okay.
No, I know he had another question.
He wanted to know what happened with,
Sisson.
yeah, Dr. Sisson resigned. She's now the health officer at Yolo County. We brought back, before she resigned, actually, we brought back and hired Dr. Rob Oldham as head of Health and Human Services. He had been with the county as our health officer for, 5 or 6 years, and had left and gone to Sutter Health, came back and took over as head of the Health and Human Services Department. He's acting in both capacities right now, and has really been helpful in moving us forward in our efforts with the state. He's very close friends with the head of public health for the state of California.
Keep an eye on that Breakfast Club agenda, because he might just be a speaker at one.
Oh, good.
So with that, we're going to move on, and Peter Kratz, Assistant Director of Placer County Public Works, is with us to talk about the McKinney-Rubicon Recreation Trail overview. Peter, you're on.
Thank you, Judy and others. Again, Peter Kratz, Assistant Director of the Placer County Public Works Department. Happy to be here to present this item to you. Again, it's an overview of the McKinney-Rubicon Recreational Trail located above the west shore of Lake Tahoe, which I think most of you know and maybe have been on and at some point. Originally, we were going to present this item way back in March of 2020, but as we've talked a lot about tonight about COVID, the meeting was canceled way back then due to transmission concerns. Like all of you, it would be better to be together in person to talk about this item along with the other items tonight, but I'm optimistic that we're going to get there, so we're not having these sterile virtual online meetings forever. And so I first want to acknowledge the long-term volunteer efforts of various user groups in helping maintain this trail. so that it continued to be used in a responsible way. And I think before I go on, Kelly, do you want me to share my screen? Or do you have the PowerPoint on your end?
I do have it. I'm just looking for it right now. It was
Okay.
right there and now.
Did it somehow go away?
Oh, I found it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe hit, let's see, F5 to get it to, you probably know that, sorry.
Hold on for me. Sorry.
Sorry, everyone, we'll get there. I've got a lot of information to cover tonight, and pictures and graphics are the best way, I think, at least as an engineer, to convey the message about what's going on with this particular trail.
Okay. Let's do this again. Do you see it up as the?
I see it now, and it's just a little bit, I'm wondering if you can hit, if you hit F5 on your keyboard, that'll blow it up, so to speak.
No.
And if not, we can just kind of work through the way it's, oh, no, I can't, so sorry. Darn it.
Okay, what do you see? Do you see it as the full presentation?
I see it with the notes as well, so it's kind of compressed. So I'm wondering, I think there's a way to view it differently. I usually hit my keyboard F5.
Yeah, it's not working for me to do that.
Okay, well, we'll adapt the best we can, and just hopefully people can see the graphics the way they are, and I'll just kind of have you scroll through as I move from one slide to the next, Kelly. So what you see here is a snapshot, an older photo of really just recognizing the work on this trail historically. It's been a trail that's been there for over 150 years, if not longer, used by Native Americans even before then, most likely. And in the early 80s, and I think this shot was taken in the 90s, just some of the particularly the volunteer groups that came forward to stabilize this trail, make it so it can be used in a responsible way and to protect the environment. So go on and go to the next slide if you would, Kelly. Oh, let's see. So there we go. So real quick on outline, what we want to cover, what I'd like to cover today is a number of items related to the trail use. And what you see here is talk about the trail setting, the responsibilities of Placer County with respect to the trail, a little bit about our maintained roadway operations and in the context of the roadways, the county roadways that we maintain adjacent to the recreational trail, and then the neighborhood that sits next to the trail, and then finally talk a little bit about winter access to the trail. So next slide, if you would.
Oh, goodness.
There we go. So hard to see, but just kind of giving everybody a kind of a geographic setting of the trail. This is a black and white topographic map. It's not great. And so Kelly, I'll probably have you go to the next slide that will highlight the trail a little bit better, that's in color. Perfect. So this, if you can see kind of a curvy red line kind of diagonally from the upper right hand to the lower left hand, that's essentially the trail alignment of the McKinney-Rubicon Trail. And on the upper right hand part of the slide, that's Placer County as the trail weaves its way to the southwest and crosses into El Dorado County. So that's, and again, we're down at West Shore on the county line near Tahoma, where we share our boundary with El Dorado County. And then the next slide. So really focusing in on kind of the trail setting in the neighborhood. Overall, the trail is 22 miles in length, and it's about 14.5 miles in El Dorado County and about 7.5 miles in Placer County. The trail straddles the watershed boundary of the Lake Tahoe Basin, with most of the trail on the basin side within Placer County, and then much of the trail outside the basin within El Dorado County. And next slide. So just a kind of a framework of Placer County responsibilities with an asset like this is really, especially in the sensitive environment of Lake Tahoe, is really to protect the water quality of adjacent surface waters and also ensure the long-term public access to an entity like this. And those both things are important. Sometimes they conflict with each other, but again, I think there's a good history here in terms of how we've maintained the trail over time and protected the water quality adjacent to the trail and how it drains into the Lake Tahoe basin. And it looks like we lost our PowerPoint. So I can kind of keep moving forward if you want, Kelly, and or else if you were able to bring it back up.
Yeah, I think she's struggling trying to get it larger for you. And
so, okay. So sorry, everyone. We'll, I can move through it verbally if we need to be respectful.
I'm going to try one thing and then see if I can get it back up. Sorry about the...
No problem.
She's trying to moderate with all the participants as well. So that's why her screen, she can't put it full size, I don't think.
Okay, is that working now? Is it full screen?
Not seeing it yet.
Yeah, we're not seeing it at all right now.
Okay, let me try this.
And I do see one comment as we're trying to get it up. I see one comment that will the PowerPoint be available? Certainly, we will certainly, like in all of our documents and meetings, we'll make this PowerPoint available to everybody.
Did that work?
Yeah, that's we're back on in the small mode. If you can go to the next.
Kelly, I'm trying to, and I'm having the same issue that you are with it. So I'm.
That's good to know.
It's not just you.
Well, we'll keep doing our best, everyone. If you want to, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll keep moving through. So just there we go. So just a bit.
Blame it on the guy who put it together.
That'd be me. So a bit on background. I've talked a little bit about this, but this is again important context of kind of where we've been and where we're going. Originally a Native American footpath, as the West developed over time, obviously used by lots of different people. And then as we all know today, the trail has definitely become a very popular multi-use recreational trail, both in the summer and winter, motorized, non-motorized use year round, kind of different sorts of uses in the summer, as you can see, between how people get up there on foot and non-motorized means. Whereas in the winter, they're on skis or snowboards or snowshoers, and the types of vehicles that are used in the winter versus the summer. I think what's important to leave people with on this slide is that back in 2000, Placer County received a notice of violation from the Lahontan Water Quality Control Board to improve the trail stability and stormwater runoff conditions. We responded back then with the help of many user volunteers, and part of the violation related to protecting the trail in the spring during snowmelt conditions and ensuring that the motorized use of the trail was better managed. And it's a really important point because back then there was a lot of runoff, there was vehicle use causing erosion, and the response was to really harden the trail, armor the trail, do the things like I showed you in the first slide to provide long-term stability to the trail. So we'll go ahead to the next slide, if you would, Kelly. There you go. So just a couple snapshots of the trail. This is good to just go back in time. This is the 1990s, which shows the trail in its state back then was not very stable. As you can see, this is, if you can tell on this slide, a lot of smaller particles, or what I call fine sediment, that during a storm, during runoff conditions, obviously that's going to impair water quality downstream. And then next slide. So there, it's back to that first slide that I showed in my opening remarks. This is what was done over time, taking segments of trail that were erosionally unstable and really armoring them, making them stable, hardening them, as we call it, so that vehicles could pass over this road and not cause impacts to water quality. Next slide. Same thing here. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears by volunteer groups to do a lot of the work over the years to make this trail stable year round. And then the next slide. And really these volunteer groups joined forces with our Public Works Department for our folks to come up with our equipment and bring materials and lay materials down and really stabilize this trail from top to bottom. Next slide. Same thing, drainages that intercept the road were stabilized over time as well. And then the next slide. Again, our crews actually doing, a lot of the trail, if you know, as it leaves the neighborhood, it's actually paved. It's paved for a few miles up from the neighborhood, and really to provide that stable surface year round. Next slide. So kind of end with talking about, not in the presentation, but in the discussion on maintenance. We go back into the 80s where we got involved with doing water quality projects along the trail. We work with the user groups like Friends of the Rubicon and other groups in response to our Lahontan NOV, and we continue this maintenance through today, using the user groups and working hard to make that happen. A couple of milestones on this slide were really in 2006. Our Board of Supervisors approached us to say, hey, we really need to do more of a formal recognition of the trail on the placer side, because it is an economy driver for the county and the region and for adjacent jurisdictions like El Dorado County, and really do a formal acknowledgement as this trail as a recreational trail. What's important is that, important distinction here is we did not accept it as a formal road easement because we weren't prepared. We didn't have the resources then, and I would say we don't have the resources today to take on more than what we're doing today, which is maintaining the water quality of the trail. And I'll talk a little bit about that more at the end of the presentation, but it is an important distinction. And then in 2020, just this year, we went through several months working with El Dorado County, the user groups, state parks, the Forest Service. I'm probably missing a few organizations, but coming up with a multi-agency memorandum of understanding. So to really streamline the program of maintaining the trail in both counties, improving the opportunities for funding to maintain the trail into the future. And then the next slide, Kelly. This this was just a marker to show you kind of our board item when we went to our board in 2006 to recognize the trail as an important recreational asset. And then the next slide. Same thing. This is just part of our board memo to make that declaration. And then we'll move to the next slide, if you would, Kelly. So I just want to spend a few minutes to talk about, in a bigger context, really what we do as a county when it comes to snow removal county-wide, or at least in the snow portion of the county, obviously, kind of how it relates to winter use on the McKinney Trail. So again, part of the context of kind of how the two things interrelate. And if you could go to the next slide. So I don't expect folks to read this, and I'm not going to read it bullet by bullet, but the intent of this slide is really to show you, as Placer County, we put a monumental effort into our snow management program, and it covers a lot of lane miles depending on the severity of the winter. And it's an important point to make, that a lot of our effort relies on maintaining our county road system, making sure our residents, our visitors, our emergency responders can get around. And a recreational trail like McKinney is important too for those recreational users, but it's not necessarily at the same level of priority in terms of maintaining our official maintained roads. So next slide. This slide just really is a graphic that just shows that in a normal year, we're covering about 219 miles of county road up in the purple on the right side of the slide. In a bigger, colder winter, obviously our road miles add up, and we can add many more miles all the way down to like the community of Forest Hill in the green zone, and our forces get stretched to cover all those additional lane miles to keep our roads open, safe, and clear. And then next slide. Just a bit on cost. Obviously the cost to maintain our county road network fluctuates with the winter, and so in a low winter we don't spend as much. Obviously in a big winter we pay a lot of overtime to our county labor. We have to spend more to maintain our equipment, and 2018 2019 is a good example one of the biggest years we've had in the last 5-6 years. We spent nearly $5 million on our snow management program for the county. And then next slide. This is just one of our pieces of equipment that we use on one of our county roads. And then we'll move to the next slide. I think all that said, our county's primary mission when it comes to snow management is to keep our officially maintained roads open and accessible to residents, visitors, and emergency responders. When it comes to winter access to public lands, the county currently does not have a program nor a budget for snow management at the McKinney Trail, nor, for that matter, a number of public lands that are adjacent to a number of county roads along the west and north shores of Lake Tahoe in our jurisdiction. So I think it's an important point for users on the McKinney Trail, people that live in the McKinney neighborhood, is that this isn't the only place where we have winter users getting onto public land next to a neighborhood. I can name a few different places up in North Shore, up along the West Shore in our neighborhoods where this routinely occurs. And I think that my point here is that we just need to figure out how we all live together and be able to work together and play together and be respectful of each other. And I think that's basically being achieved. And I'll talk about a few things in terms of what I've experienced with the McKinney Trail use in the wintertime. So next slide. So this really is the heart of what we're talking about. This is the intersection of McKinney Road and Evergreen Road in the neighborhood. And this is the berm of snow that gets piled up from our county road snow removal program. This is from March of 2018. And what people do to get on the trail when the snow berm gets really big is by hand, they'll cut through that berm with their shovels and do other things. And as long as they're outside the county road right away and doing that in a safe way, we're definitely okay with that. So I have been approached over the years by both the neighborhood and winter users of the McKinney Trail about the county's role and critique of what we are doing and what we are not doing. And I'd like to distill that down as follows, if I could. So a number of points from the winter users that I hear is that, number one, we are stacking too much snow at the trailhead and making it difficult to access the trail. Number two, someone or some persons are illegally stacking snow at the trailhead, making it difficult to access the trail. Number three, the county should be doing more to improve access to the trail by treating it more like a driveway or a road. Number four, the county should patrol more and cite the illegal actions of stacking private snow at the trailhead entrance. From the neighborhood, I hear these points distilled down. Lahontan issued a notice of violation to the county years ago on the water quality condition of the trail, and winter users are potentially impacting the water quality of the trail, risking the county receiving another violation. Number two, I hear from the neighborhood that we have had to respond to, or the neighborhood, I should say, has had to respond to irresponsible or unprepared winter users getting stuck on the trail. And number three, we have had winter users knock on our doors in the middle of the night because they got stuck. So a little bit on just response to these comments from both users and the neighborhood. For the users, I would say, I would make these points, and we've had ongoing discussions, and I just want to reiterate here. Public Works will continue to do our best to continue acknowledging the trailhead as an access point to public land. What I mean by that is we will limit significant stacking or storage of snow as much as practicable, while still making sure the adjacent county maintained roadways are safely clear of snow. Again, that is our primary mission, to maintain our county road network adjacent to the trailhead. Number two, our snow parking compliance officer has been informed of the illegal snow dumping allegations, and he will routinely patrol the neighborhood for such activity. Clearly, he cannot be there every day, but there will be a county presence. In addition, I was actually on the phone today with Placer County Sheriff's Office, and they would like to make contact with anyone that can be identified performing the illegal activity. Number three, with the user's encouragement, Public Works relocated the no winter parking signage that you see there on this slide closer to the paved roadway so that users were better informed on the county's no winter parking codes. And I think that's important too, because In the winter, we can't park on the roads, and the users, I believe, have been respectful of that, and that's an educational piece that I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. For the neighborhood, I'd like to offer these points. Motorized travel over the snow should not result in a water quality issue or infraction. And if in the future the trail was cleared of snow, that type of operation can only occur on a paved surface. The trail is paved for a number of miles, and it would be properly demarcated with snow poles if a program was to be approved and funded. Number two, clearly the concern over water quality is valid during spring and snowmelt conditions. However, over the years, like I said previously, the county and user groups have stabilized and armored the trail with rock and other materials to minimize this historic concern. Number three, the allegations over having to rescue someone or deal with noise, for instance, can be remedied through engaging with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. And I think through that, making that contact, I think what's important is they, again, discussions with Placer County Sheriff's Office today, they welcome that engagement. If people are concerned or have an altercation of sorts, that's what the Sheriff's Office is there for. They're there as a resource. Don't try to take that onto your own. And then I would say that, you know, the trail has been there for over 150 years with constant use. The county routinely receives complaints regarding winter use, not just on the McKinney Trail, but at other public land access points I've mentioned earlier around other portions of the lake. The county is not in a position to limit or prohibit access to public land. Clearly, there are existing county codes addressing illegal parking and disturbing the peace, for instance. And again, Placer County Sheriff's Office encourages the neighborhood to contact them to facilitate any sort of interaction with an unprepared or irresponsible user. And then finally, I would say from the user's perspective, they are working very diligently in looking for ways to further educate users, wintertime users, to be prepared when they go out on the snow, on their vehicles. And the county actually supports the idea of a sign at the trailhead here that is a bit of a checklist of making sure you've got everything you need before you go out onto the trail. So those are some of the things. I know, I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded, but this is, it's an important, as a longtime public servant in Placer County, I find this is an important issue, like all issues are, for both residents, visitors, people that want to get out on public land. We have a neighborhood next to a public land. It's not unique. We see this in a lot of places within our county. And I'm just looking for a way to kind of bring everyone together, keep the dialogue going, doing some things that I think hopefully are fruitful, make sure people know what resources they have going forward. And then I'll finish off with a couple more slides on the presentation and open it up for any questions, Kelly. So if you can move to the next slide. Next slide is just another, not the same shot as before. This was this was actually this year, January 2020. And during low snow conditions, it's really not as big of a deal. We don't get the berm buildup, and you can just see, obviously, people are traveling over the snow and up the trail alignment. And then the next slide. Another shot when, again, low snowfall conditions, but it just really shows you kind of the layout of the intersection of the maintained county road network that's paved, and then the trailhead that's off to the right on the upper right-hand slide. And then the final slide, if you could go to. You know, this is finally getting to this place of talking about, okay, what about long-term? What are long-term considerations here? So short term, I've really talked about already. I kind of gave you the context of trail use as I understand it, what's been going on for the last several years, kind of the uptick in motorized use on the trail, but not just this trail within Placer County. What are some considerations going forward? So this last slide really just shows you where long-term considerations could include a snow park of sorts, with a potential location shown here, as you see on the slide. This would be about 2,200 feet south of the Evergreen McKinney Road intersection, where you see the little yellow push point. And obviously, this type of improvement and program would be largely dependent on securing funds to analyze, design, permit, build, and operate such a facility. But I think that's long-term vision. I know people in the audience tonight have talked about this potentially, the user groups. I want to make sure the neighborhood is, they understand kind of what the county thinks, both short-term, long-term. I think something like this being considered long-term is, has merit. Obviously, if it's done like any project done in a responsible way, the use of backcountry of our public lands is going to continue to go up, both in a motorized and non-motorized fashion. So these are things we need to think about into the future. So with that, I'll leave it at that, and happy to address any comments or questions people may have. Thank you so much for your time and attention on this matter.
Thanks, Peter. So first of all, I want to thank all the IT people out there for your helpful suggestions. We were trying to straighten this out in the background, and although we could see it on our screens larger, we weren't able to get it up on the screen, so we tried. There were some questions, Peter, about do you have cost projections for this coming winter?
Let's see. I don't, in terms of kind of our county-wide snow management program. It's got a budget that fluctuates depending on the size of the winter. We don't really put any dedicated funding into the trail, the McKinney Trail, for winter use. We are doing our best and having ongoing dialogue with the user groups to make sure we try to recognize the intersection and the trailhead as a driveway of sorts, and try to limit the snow storage there as much as we can.
And Kevin also had a question about when you were talking about parking. Are you hearing similar things from some of the other neighborhoods, like up in Ward Canyon, up by Alpine Peaks, at the top there?
We do get complaints of parking at various trailheads up in Alpine Meadows, for instance, Ward for sure. And we do our best to respond to, we do tend to be complaint driven with compliance matters. Oftentimes we do our best. We have folks that are out there on patrol. They've already started this month because, as you know, it's no parking on our roadways starting November 1 through May 1. And so we do respond to calls, obviously, and do our patrols throughout our county road network.
Peter, how can people access the link to the PowerPoint?
Good question, Judy. Maybe I'm trying to think from an IT perspective, what's the best way to pass this PowerPoint along? Maybe Kelly and I need to work offline to figure out the best, because it's probably one of the problems falls back on me. It was a pretty big file. I'll just say that, with lots of photos. I get that. So why don't we'll promise people that Kelly and I will work together to figure out how we can either post it on our website. That might be the easiest, because it's about a 30 meg file. And so that's hard to email to people, quite frankly.
What I could do, Peter, is I'm sending out a newsletter the beginning of next week, and we could put the link, once you get the link, we can put it in the District 5 newsletter.
Perfect.
So that people can easily, because the website is so big, people won't know necessarily where to go. I can hardly find things.
Right. I agree, Cindy. Yes, that sounds good.
And then I think, Chris, your question actually has to do with item number 6, the Zephyr collaboration presentation. And I know that just to answer it, because it sounds like you might not want to stick around for the whole meeting, but I know that Aaron did give that presentation at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And I think, again, some of that information will be in Supervisor Gustafson's newsletter.
And then
Okay.
from an IT perspective, Jude, I just saw a comment about saving the file as a PDF. Clearly, that's a great way to go, and we'll look to do that, make it easier to
Yeah,
access.
well, I gave it the 2 hours to download, and then I played with it a little bit, but I still couldn't get it full screen. So if there are no other questions for Peter, thank you for that presentation. And you're right, March would be good if we could all get together then, but we do what we can, right? We're going to move on. Also, Peter is going to present General Transportation County Road Operations Update. A reminder of winter restrictions on the roads, information on neighborhood traffic management program, and current overview of transportation plans and projects.
And
Peter.
again, thank you, Judy and others. And again, for the record, Peter Kratz with Placer County Public Works Department. And I'll apologize up front that this presentation is part of that same file. I apologize, and I don't know if Kelly or you can bring it up, but if you can't, it's not the end of the world. I'll work my way through some of my topics on the transportation update.
Let me bring it up. I think I might have worked out the kink. Okay.
All right, so
Is that the full screen?
it was for a minute, Kelly.
Okay. Okay, I think I got it. Let me just go to the last slide. So
While you're setting that up, were there any other questions? I know there's a phone in and we can kind of see the chat and the Q&As. Aha, there was another Q&A, sorry. Peter, I'm gonna go back while Kelly's
Sure.
getting that.
That's
Other
fine.
than people trying not to pile too much snow at the entrance this winter, what is Placer County going to do differently to prevent a 10-foot snow wall from being built up?
Right, so I think it's a combination of, our practices. I don't think our practices have ever been one that creates a big snow wall ever on purpose. It's that during big snow years, we have to respect everyone's right of way, everyone's property around that particular intersection. So it's easy to just say, move it over here, move it over there. And it's not so simple when you clear an intersection of snow. And so again, I think what's changed is our workers recognize this as a popular access point. They're doing everything they can, and I won't get into the weeds on just how a plow works or how a blower works, but it's safe to say that they're looking for ways to not stack most of the snow or less snow as much as they can in this area of the trailhead. Secondly, with the presence of our code compliance out there, looking for illegal activities, that's another opportunity or another, I'll say, activity that we will be partaking in as well, is making sure our folks know that that's a potential thing that's happened out there in the past, and we want to obviously prevent that in the future.
And I want to remind people that Kelly does have the ability to unmute you if you want to ask a question and not necessarily type it. So raise your hand for that. And also, Peter, there's one more comment from the Rubicon Trail Foundation that you're aware of the offer. The Rubicon Trail Foundation supports maintaining the trail to be available for winter use by not piling up snow storage, and would be available to discuss any financial support for educational materials. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. I can
And
follow
are there
up.
any other questions on the previous presentation? No. Okay.
All right, so
Great.
thanks everyone.
Peter.
I'll move on to our kind of just a quick, hopefully a relatively quick overview of transportation initiatives and projects and activities in Placer County. Cindy covered some of this already. Thank you so much, Cindy, but I'll go into a little bit more into detail on some items related to transportation in Placer County. What I won't do is get super specific on any one thing, as again, there is a plethora of things going on, I think, as we all know, and as Cindy pointed out. So, but what I will do is hit on a few topics I believe are important, and then do my best on addressing any questions you might have. So since it's winter, I'll remind folks about our limited parking program. I call it limited because it's a soft way of saying you can't park on our county roads from November 1 to April 30th, but we do have county parking facilities that you can park at in our town centers, for instance. I'll then also I'll highlight some issues with our existing neighborhood traffic management program. I'll then hit on some adaptive management measures we deployed this summer to improve multimodal mobility in our town centers. I'll follow that with mentioning the recent adoption of our Resort Triangle Transportation Plan that really Cindy hit on already. And I'll conclude with summarizing a few active projects in the works. So if you could move on to the next slide. So this is a sketch of what it's on our website, and it's a friendly reminder for residents and visitors to our area for how our county roads are managed with respect to parking, and how you could be at risk of a citation if you're parking on our roadways or our shoulders. And I think the important point of this diagram is really to remind people that it's not just you can't park on the paved surface of our roads, but you can't park on the shoulder area either. And you can't park behind the snow poles either, as you see in this diagram. Those are all the areas where we push the road snow to keep our roads open and clear. Clearly on the driveway here that you see in the middle of the slide that's a legal place to park your car on your driveway, even if you're sticking out, into what we call the public right of way. So I know it's challenging. I know we have places in Placer County where the lots are so small, like Kings Beach, where you barely have any place to park your cars. And there are challenging places. We do what we can to work with people. It's tough at times. We also try to be sensitive to the winters or the times of the winter where we're not getting a ton of snow, or we're not doing a lot of operations. We're not going out there to give tickets just to make money. This is not a money maker for us. It's really it's a way to control and do the best to keep our roads safe and open and accessible to everybody. So just a reminder on that. I will let you know too that, a little bit on STRs that I won't get into the weeds on, but short-term rentals, we have code compliance involved with STRs because, I think it's important to support the community on making sure STRs remain in compliance. And one of those issues can be parking at STRs, and we're working collaboratively with with the STR folks to make sure that parking is managed as well as we can across our jurisdiction. I will also say on this issue, a couple things on snow management for Placer County is that last year and this year, we're actually hiring some private contractors to do more on the routes to our schools. In this case, Kings Beach Elementary and North Tahoe High, to actually just do a bit more on those roads so that our kids can get safely to and from school on the buses. And on that note, I know we have a new school superintendent for TTUSD, and we look to meet her later this as we get ready for winter operations and make sure she knows about all of our operations going forward. So the next slide. Thanks. So a little bit about neighborhood traffic calming. Just to mention that this is a written program the county has. It was adopted back in 2007. It's what we use today to respond to requests for traffic calming across the whole county. I bring this up just because it's a hot topic lately, and particularly this year. I would say anecdotally, we've received more requests from neighborhoods within Eastern Placer County than ever before. And I think, anecdotally, again, more people with COVID coming up, potentially living in their second homes longer, spending the summer there. And so we tend to have more traffic on our residential roads, and hence more of the requests for dealing with our county roads with traffic calming. Traffic calming is not a real simple thing. We don't just go out there and throw in humps, throw in speed signs. There's a plethora of tools you can use for traffic calming, but it goes through a process, it goes through a formal request, and it is resource dependent. We handle as many as we can, and it does take time to get through the process because we require a majority of residents on a road to support traffic calming efforts. And so that's just kind of a summary of what we do. I will say a little bit about the places where we do have a high density of traffic calming measures, and that is in Kings Beach and the Fish and Mammal Streets, and that relates to the Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project. And we did a lot there because we put the highway on a road diet to improve the safety and the mobility of all users of the highway. And I would just say that we have saturated the Fish and Mammal Streets with traffic calming measures. And some people may disagree with me, but we've kind of reached a point where we can't continue to put in additional humps and additional signs and those sorts of things. We don't, as transportation engineers, we don't feel that the benefit is really there to do much more in a neighborhood like that. We really have to think about kind of bigger picture options, whether it's restriction during peak periods, which El Dorado County is actually exploring in their jurisdiction, and I'm tracking what they're doing down there for wintertime road use. And so there are things that we can think out of the box more beyond what we've done already in places like Kings Beach. And also where I want to segue on this is really, can we do more on the highway? Because that's where the traffic, where we want to keep the traffic as much as possible. So if you could go to the next slide, Kelly or Judy, thank you. And really the segue here is, can we do more on the highway to keep the highway flowing better? And so a good example is this summer, we deployed traffic guards, as I call them. And it was a private contractor that we hired to really meter and control pedestrian crossings on our high volume crosswalks, both in Tahoe City and Kings Beach. This is one of the Kings Beach roundabouts. And it anecdotally, and lots of observations and a lot of feedback that I received, was that it really did help. It helped with traffic flow during peak periods. We only deployed the traffic guards on the weekends and sometimes on Fridays, but it really helped build up a mass of pedestrians, and then the traffic guard would let them go all at one time, kind of like a pedestrian signal like you see at Fanny Bridge. And so that was helpful, and we hope to deploy that again and explore other adaptive management measures where we can really help with the flow of the highway traffic and trying to keep them out of our residential streets. And so with that, if you can go to the next slide, kind of beyond just using traffic guards, we're really going down the line of working closely with Caltrans and getting permits and doing a portable or pilot project next year. This is Grove Street in 28, and this just shows one of our plan sheets of a temporary signal at Grove Street in 28 to really help control the pedestrian crossings there. As we all know, that's one of the highest volume crosswalks in Tahoe City during the summer. And also do the same thing at the Kings Beach roundabout crosswalks, put in portable signals to meter pedestrian traffic across those crosswalks as well. So we're ramping up beyond crossing guards, trying to do more and more on the highways in our town centers where we have so much pedestrian traffic. You can go to the next slide and we'll show a plan sheet for the pedestrian signals layout at one of the roundabouts in Kings Beach. This is the one at Bear and 28, I believe. So that's just a quick update on kind of traffic management in both our town centers and across this part of Placer County. Well, I'll change subjects and we'll go to the next slide. The next slide just really focuses on a few slides taken out of a recent PowerPoint that were presented by Stephanie Holloway, our senior transportation engineer at our Placer County Board of Supervisors last month, that Cindy mentioned, our Resort Triangle Transportation Plan. And this is really important. I mean, again, this is big picture of taking a lot of what we're already doing today and advancing it that much more with kind of big vision of, improving, enhancing public transit in our area. I think we all can agree as longtime residents that, we had so many people coming up here, and it's a big shift that needs to occur over time, but it really does need to occur. We can't build our way out of just having the vehicle, the automobile, dominate the way people get around. We just can't. We can't build 4-lane highways around the lake. That all is ancient history. And so this plan really focuses on what we can do to prioritize transit, improve walkability and bikeability in our town centers and our high visited areas, and have a fully connected network of transit and paths and biking facilities so that there's less reliance on the personal automobile, quite frankly. So next slide. And in part, as Cindy pointed out earlier, a lot of this is working with other agencies like the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. They have their upcoming regional transportation plan update going to their board that Cindy sits on, as you know. And it's important to be working with TRPA on their plan and how it interacts with our plan. And then, of course, Cindy being the chair of the TTD, Tyler Transportation District, they're very involved with transportation as well. So those two groups in Placer County, we work very closely together to, again, look to achieve these goals over time within Placer County. And then the next slide. Next slide is really just highlighting the focus areas for the Resort Triangle Transportation Plan, adaptive corridor management, which is really doing things like putting in a transit lane on the highways of 267 and 89. That's one of the bigger goals over time. A huge focus on parking management. A lot of you, I think, have heard about this. We've talked about this, but I think this is critical for our town centers, and not just our town centers, but really having a better way to how people come to our area and park their cars and use the parking that's out there today, and not just think we have to build more parking. It's kind of like what I said earlier about building more roadway capacity. That's not what we want to do. And then getting into transportation demand management, that's really incentivizing employers, for example, for their employees to subsidize them to take transit and do some other things to really lessen the use of the personal automobile. And then, of course, vehicle miles traveled, that relates to Senate Bill 743, that all the counties and cities and Caltrans in the state of California really have to make a shift on how we approve, well, in one sense, approve land development projects. It used to be we looked at level of service for our intersections and our roadway segments. Now it's more really focusing on multimodal, and again, reducing dependency, reducing miles traveled by vehicles, shifting to transit use. Things like microtransit, Mountaineer is a great example that was used in Alpine Meadows and Squaw Valley last year. That's the kind of thing we want to foster more in Placer County so we can better serve our neighborhoods. It doesn't make sense to send our big TARP buses up into our neighborhoods. What makes more sense is to partner with other entities like Mountaineer to serve those neighborhoods and then link into our mainline service, which is TART, out on Highway 267, 89, and 28, for example. So I'll leave that update, leave that one, and then go to my final slide, which is really just active projects that are in the works that are being led or partnered by the Department of Public Works. And these are just a few snapshots of some of the projects we're working on. At the top, we have the Western Approach, which is the 267-28 intersection project we're working on. In the middle there, we have the Parking Facilities Improvement Project, which is in downtown Tahoe City. And then in the lower graphic is Fanny Bridge in its rebuilt condition, hopefully in a few years, where the rest of the Fanny Bridge project gets built, and that bridge, that 90-year-old plus bridge, gets rebuilt with 6-foot sidewalks on both sides, and really invites more public or pedestrian activity up and down the bridge and to the south, where the highway will become officially a county road, and that will become what I call a complete street, to really have a great asset for Tahoe City, to have street fairs and close down that roadway to invite more public pedestrian activity, that sort of thing. So I'll close with that, and I can certainly talk about any of those projects or any more that I haven't mentioned on this or shown on this slide, or anything else that people have questions about. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Peter. I want to remind everybody you can use the raise hand function. I know there's a call-in if you want to ask questions in your own voice. You're encouraged to do so. There is a question, Peter, given that we're about to re-enter purple status, maybe, is spending money on clearing roads to get kids to a physical school a good investment? And the second part of Kevin's question is, how do we measure the impact of traffic calming? Do we know whether the deployment is actually slowing down through traffic and reducing the frequency of injury-causing accidents?
So great questions, Kevin. The first one is, it's a tough one because we have to put together our contracts before winter starts for clearing our roads, and especially if we hire private contractors to do that. It's a tough spot to kind of reverse our contracts after they've already rolled out. So, I mean, call it government inefficiency, if you will, but we have to be prepared. And so I can't, at this point, I'm optimistic that kids will be remain going to school, and we'll have those contracts remain in place. And we have to just think conservatively. Your second question, great question on measuring traffic calming. I didn't get too much into the weeds when I presented that item, but it's as simple as this. When we get a request, the first thing we do, and we get a majority of the neighborhood that wants to go forward, we do a speed survey on a particular road, and we measure the speed on that road. And we have a threshold, for instance, that on a 25-mile-per-hour road, average speeds need to be 32 miles per hour or higher for us to consider physical measures like speed humps, speed cushions, those sorts of things. If we don't get above 32, we can do signage, we can do things like that. And then we do a we will do a post speed survey to quantify the speed reduction. And if you look at studies across the country, speed humps do reduce speeds. And so I'll just end it with that.
We do have a raised hand. I'm going to read Megan's question first. Is it possible, as many Kings Beach residents have asked, if the speed limit through the grid can be reduced to 15?
Great question, and I have heard this before. It's very difficult. I can't state all the California Vehicle Code laws that relate to this, but going below 25 miles per hour is not. It's my understanding it's not doable on a public road that I'm aware of in the state of California. There may be some examples that I'm not aware of, and I can revisit that again with our transportation engineers, but I do not think it's possible or enforceable. So I apologize.
Okay. And I emailed you an observation from Heidi of something that she wants you to be aware of. I sent you an email.
Okay.
But Sierra Core Program, you're unmuted.
Oh. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep. I know that voice.
This is Nicole. Yeah, it's Nicole Lutzkamiller. Sorry, I forgot to change my name from my work Zoom account before getting on this, I guess. Anyways, Nicole Lutzkamiller, NITRAC member and Tahoe City resident. Peter, I had a neighbor, I just moved into the Highlands over the summer, and I live on Polaris, right near the high school, and had a neighbor come knock on my door a couple weeks ago with a letter that stating she has been working with you on some potential traffic calming solutions on Polaris between Old Mill and the high school. And I was just wondering if you can maybe give a very brief update on that. She said you were looking at potentially installing the electronic signs that state what speed you're going as you drive by, and that there may be a point where we could do the speed monitoring to determine if speed bumps need to go in, because obviously once school started, the situation changed a lot on Polaris, or once kids returned back to school, I should say.
Right. So my understanding of that project status is we are leaning towards speed feedback signs, as you referred to, whether they're mobile or permanent. One of the things I wanted to mention is we'd really like to, we're looking for funding now to purchase at least a few of the mobile speed feedback signs. We definitely think it would be a great affordable traffic calming measure that when we get the request from any particular neighborhood, we can just deploy one out on that road and move it around at will. So we don't have any today. CHP does have a few, and we can ask the CHP to help out. But for Polaris in particular, I think that's where we're heading right now, is looking at both either temporary or permanent speed feedback signs. We want to be respectful of the potential project that's happening with the Cross Country Center and not jump too far ahead with anything beyond signage and feedback signs, knowing that there's a project that's being analyzed right now at the end of Polaris. And so, but that doesn't mean to say we're still trying to work on solutions, like I said.
Okay, that kind of segued into my other question, was about that potential cross-country project, I guess, and what stage of planning is that in? Because I hadn't heard about it until my neighbor brought it up, and I was kind of surprised to not have heard about it.
So
Does anyone have Cindy?
I don't specifically, and I don't know if Judy or Cindy or others may have an update. It's not.
I'm sure Judy does. It is a Tahoe City Public Utility District in along with the Tahoe Cross Country Ski Education Association project. Judy,
So
timing?
It's in the CEQA process. The draft comments have been received. The final has not been released yet. Hopefully
Thanks.
early, maybe February or March, somewhere in there. But don't hold me
Cool.
to
Thank you,
that.
guys.
Thanks, Nicole. Any other questions for Peter? I don't see any.
I see one about the 25-mile-per-hour rule.
Yes, thank you.
And I need to kind of maybe work on that offline so I don't take up too much of everyone's time. It's important, and I'm not trying to. I'll definitely look to get a response back to Kevin after the meeting, if that's possible.
We have a
Perhaps,
question from,
I was just going to ask if anyone who wants responses, put their emails in the chat. Judy, can then you and Kelly provide
Okay.
us a list of anybody who wants responses to these? That might be the quickest as well.
Sure. Ann Nichols, you were next. Kelly, if you'll unmute her. Thank you.
Muted her. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Anne, and you can talk.
Go ahead, Ann. And it appears that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Are you? Okay, we'll come back. Let's go to Becky.
How about this?
There you
Does this
go.
work?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry. So we have, as you've said, a limited infrastructure. We only have so many roads. And it appears to most of us, especially like myself in the real estate business, that our population has doubled over the summer. I know the applications for enrollment in schools, et cetera. So we are really, in this whole multimodal thing, it just seems to be delusional. There's efficient ways for families to get around. It's in big cars, pretty much, to go to the beach, everything else. So I just wish we'd get more realistic and not throw around these terms like multimodal is going to fix everything. It's very doubtful. We're in trouble here. And the real problem with all of this is overdevelopment. And that's what's been going on and continues with Truckee and Reno, and we're in real trouble. We got to get real about this. And I hope we can start really talking about solutions and not catchwords. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Becky McFadden, Rebecca.
So I was similar to what Nicole was mentioning. I live on Cedarwood, one street up from Nicole, and I've had a lot of complaints about the speed on Village Boulevard this summer. It's becoming quite dangerous. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it would exceed, Peter, your 32-mile-an-hour threshold, but trying to get some kind of monitoring on Village with everybody going up to go mountain biking and coming up to go skiing. Village on the way up to the Nordic Center.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the problem is there's not a lot of residents whose homes addresses, I don't believe, are Village. They're all on the cross streets. But so I'm not sure what would be involved with getting enough residents to be concerned, but it's becoming more and more dangerous to the point that neighbors are purposely standing in the middle of the road so cars have to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem like a very safe alternative.
Right. And so not to belabor that point on, if it's, make sure that we can talk offline too, to kind of go forward with there's a formal process and a request to kind of move something new forward or a new street forward through our process. So that's,
Okay.
Again, you can email me offline and we can start that process.
That'd be great.
One thing I should note that I failed to mention in my original presentation on neighborhood traffic calming, we have had recent dialogue with North Tahoe Fire, and I think the big request by North Tahoe Fire going forward with traffic calming in this part of Placer County is making sure on the front end that neighborhood and residents know that, in particular, vertical calming measures like speed humps, speed cushions, as I refer to them as, impact emergency response time. And it's known to do that. That's a fact. And I think what's important here, my point here is that we need to make sure as transportation engineers, we strike a balance and make sure people know that response to your neighborhood, will be impacted if certain measures are deployed. And really, it's really fire's request to make sure people know that on the front end and that they're involved, that fire's involved with these requests and these projects as they move forward. So we're working to make sure it's more of a all-inclusive process involving North Tahoe Fire on these requests going forward.
Thanks.
Really
I
good
think-
point.
I
Good
think
point,
Mike
Peter.
Ford
And
brought that up in one of our meetings.
yeah. And I wanted to add, I could give you probably 5 more street names where we've gotten emails on speed issues: Old County Road, continuing on Bunker, going up that way. Lake Forest Road, somebody went out and stenciled their own 25-mile-an-hour signs on Lake Forest Road. If you haven't been there, Bristol Cone. So there's a lot of speeding going on, and I think we need to probably look at a process, Peter, for up here, so we can, because we're not going to get them all in one year. We're going to have to
Right.
look at those in some sort of process point. But
And
I think really
yeah.
good points.
And I didn't mention, enforcement is a piece to this for sure. It's having more discussions with CHP, but it's a combination of things. We can't rely just on enforcement. We can't just rely on it's a combination of things to kind of help in hopefully a bit of a cultural change that can occur over time. That it's just not easy. And then being respectful of emergency responders too at the same time, that we can't just blanket our roads with speed humps. There's got to be a balance of what we deploy out there.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure. Yep.
And then there's another comment from Kevin Kelly to Nicole's point. How many groups coming up to Lakefront District 5 are open to multimodal, e.g. public transit? How did we decide that approach was an appropriate use of resources?
That's about a 30-year discussion, right? Because that includes trails, walkways, sidewalks. Multimodal means a whole lot of different things. And with the advent of e-bikes now, and what we're seeing in commute is not just about public transit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whoops, and we've tried, how we get people around in a variety of ways, Peter. So I don't know that we can go into that tonight. I'd like to get through as much of the rest of our item, but I do think these are important, especially I would direct Kevin to looking at the regional transportation plan of TRPA that's updated every 4 years. Some of those broader regional efforts, I think, are really important to understand the context. And the debates go on at a variety of decision-making bodies. And I think those are good points to bring up to those decision-making bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's recently been updated again, the TRPA plan. So,
well, it's out for comment, right?
So anything else? Well, we've got Peter. Yes, Team A, we're going to get there. All right, Peter, thank you. We're going to move on then. Crystal Jacobson, welcome home where you belong.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Yep.
Is going to talk about the Lakeside Redevelopment Project status.
Great,
Crystal,
thank you.
who are you?
Yes. Hi, thank you, Judy. I'm Crystal Jacobson, the Deputy Director of the Community Development Resource Agency in Tahoe. And as Judy mentioned here tonight, just to give you an update on the Lakeside Redevelopment Residential Project, otherwise known as La Lima to some folks. So this was the project that is in the town center of Kings Beach. It was presented to the Planning Commission back in May. And it was denied by the Planning Commission in May. And so the applicants did file an appeal. to the Board of Supervisors. That appeal was heard on September 1st. It was actually continued. It went before the board on September 1st. And then continued off calendars that the applicant team could explore a potential hotel project on the lakeside of that site. So we have been working with them since that time, working with the applicant team, the North Tahoe Public Utility District, the North Tahoe Fire Protection District, and others on really the technical feasibility of a hotel project on the lake. And so with that, I'll just say that, you know, there's a lot of complexities to that feasibility. Namely, there's a few things that would really need to be required for that project to work. One is the abandonment of Brockway Vista would need to happen. They would also be looking at about an 80 hotel key project to make that work, and potentially up to 3 stories in height. So those are some things that, you know, with that comes some challenges. And so we have been working through the feasibility of those items. And then I wanted to point out that on November 17th, so next week, staff will be providing an update to our board on the progress that has been made and kind of the next steps. That's not an appeal hearing at that time. It's just simply an update on the status. The appeal hearing has not been scheduled at this time. And so again, it's just has been continued off calendar so that we can continue to work through this concept of a hotel on the lakeside. So the good news is the applicants have listened to the community and they are interested in exploring this concept. And we have been actively working with them, meeting with them every week on the feasibility side of things. So I'm happy to answer questions. There's not a whole lot more to report than that, unfortunately, but I think that is some good news for the community.
Crystal, I just wanted to thank you and all of staff for working so diligently to try to push this development to what we want to, you know, what the community wants, what was envisioned in our town center development. And I think all the efforts that you're making are going to hopefully be successful, and we'll find a way through to make this vision happen, because I think it's what the community really strongly said. So I want to thank you. Yeah.
It's good.
Any comments? There is a hand raised. Ann Nichols?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So was the abandonment of Brockway Vista Avenue, is the area they want abandoned all surrounded by their own property and no one else's?
It would be their properties, yes. It's not the entirety of Brockway Vista. And Peter has been a part of the team that has been working with the applicants. So Peter, if you want to or have anything else to chime, you know, if you want to chime in on the abandonment piece. But it's my understanding it would just be their properties. It's not an abandonment of the entire roadway.
Okay, it'd be great to see a map. And then
Correct.
3 stories, what is the height of 3 stories?
We haven't looked at detailed plans in terms of the specific feet, but I do know it's 3 stories. Typically, a 3-story building could be anywhere from, 36 feet to, I would say 30 to 40 feet, perhaps.
Right.
We haven't seen, it's really important to note we have not seen, everything we've seen so far has been concept. So we're not looking at a formal project, application submittal where we've had detailed elevations.
Right, because you were going to have, view corridors and, we were hoping that there'd be nothing on the lakeside when we did the community plan team that was over 36 feet. So we're hoping that you're still trying to get that going with the developer.
They are working within the parameters of the area plan standards, I would say that. And so right now, again, this is it's a concept, but certainly don't have any formal submittal with like I said, elevation. So I can't give you specifics on that, Anne.
Well, thank you. And I think the area plan, unfortunately, was not what we asked for, but what TRPA decided was 56 feet, which was 20 feet taller they would allow, which we certainly didn't want to see on the lake. But, you know, we know that they didn't listen to us, but thank you.
Mhm.
There's another hand up. Don't see it now.
Oh, Megan Cellini.
There it is. Megan. Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, hi there, everyone. Megan Shalimi, seat 1 of NetRac, Kings Beach resident. Once again, NetRac unanimously denied this project. As it was a recommendation for full denial back last May, followed up by the Planning Commission. We really need that balanced mixed-use project that's going to promote economic growth within the Kings Beach community and provide benefits as well to the community. But, at this point, I want to thank planning staff, all you folks and everything that have been working on this on staff to really put together a project that will benefit the community long term. This is going to set the tone for development within Kings Beach for decades to come. And it's really critical to our success. So once again, I want to thank Placer Planning, the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors for supporting us. But we really are watching this, hoping for a project that will really set the tone for our town center. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Any other comments? My glasses are fogging, sorry. Mike Schwartz. Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate you including our Prevention Bureau involved during pre-development. I believe that would be Chief Mike Schwartz.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, I think that's it. Any other questions, comments for Crystal? Hearing none, we're going to move on. Erin, Casey, if you're ready for us.
I'm ready for you.
Great.
See if you're ready.
North Lake Tahoe Stronger Together. I believe this is a presentation that you gave on the Zephyr collaboration. I'm going to let you go ahead.
Thank you. And I believe Jeffrey Hentz may still be on the call. And if he is, would you mind giving him permission? Because he may join me for part of this presentation.
Still on the call.
All right. So good evening, everybody. Erin Casey here with the County Executive Office in North Lake Tahoe. I'm really happy to present this item to all of you at this late hour. I think it's a great way to kind of wrap up this evening's presentations and some of the updates that Cindy provided to you earlier. The county has been working very closely with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association on this effort. It is really about trying to address some of the divisiveness in our community that has come about as a result of COVID, or at least some of the issues that have been highlighted as a result of COVID over the last several months. And our desire to create a more constructive environment for people to have conversations about the issues and then also to identify and develop solutions. So it's really a solutions-oriented program. We've hired Zephyr Collaboration. They have done a lot of work in our community on a variety of projects, so they have a lot of familiarity with North Lake Tahoe, which has been great to facilitate several sessions for us and working with different community partners. So really the idea again was to bring people together, talk about the issues that have been really highlighted or exacerbated by coronavirus over the last several months, hear about those issues, understand them from different perspectives, and then develop solutions as a community, and then work through that foundation to continue to develop, or excuse me, to continue to address these issues as we anticipate that they will be sort of long-term moving into the future. So what were some of the things that Zephyr Collaboration did? One is a quality of life survey. Over 500 responses were received by our consultant on this. So hopefully many of you were able to participate. It was a quick survey, about 5 questions and several responses that helped us to understand really what was at the heart of the concerns for the community. We also developed and facilitated 4 focus groups with community members, including residents, business owners, community leaders, and others. So a very broad cross-section of our community with people that have very different perspectives on a number of issues to sit down, have conversation with us. We were there to listen, Resort Association and county staff, including Cindy as well, to really understand from people firsthand what they were concerned with, and then also try to move into the direction of developing some ideas around long-term and short-term solutions in those focus groups. So, moving on to the next slide. Here are some of the survey response themes. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through this, but I think what you'll notice is there's a lot of consistency here between the themes that we've identified through the surveys, and then some of the projects and programs that you've heard about earlier, particularly what Supervisor Gustafson was talking about, as well as Peter Kratz on a lot of the traffic management components. So survey response themes, and again, this is based on the perspective of many of our community members, and these are very solutions focused, these responses. The first is the development of a sustainable transportation infrastructure, including additional transportation and parking options. I know Peter has spent some time talking with all of you about that this evening. Coordinated messaging for how to enjoy Lake Tahoe safely and sustainably. We did a fair amount working with the Tahoe Fund over the summer, and we'll continue working with them into the winter and into the spring and next year to continue to develop that coordinated messaging. And people in our community really emphasize the importance of continuing to do that. Item number 3 is enforcement of current regulations related to short-term rentals, including the requirement of bear-proof trash receptacles, which are required by our short-term rental ordinance. Parking and masks. So enforcement of parking, as we've also heard a little bit about this evening, mask wearing and physical distancing. Number 4, waste reduction and proper disposal. So this again is tied back to trash and litter, which have been large issues that have come up over the course of the summer. And then affordable housing for those working in North Lake Tahoe. That continues to be a theme that we see in all of our efforts in outreach with the community in terms of one of the most important and critical issues in our community that we need to address. What's happening next? So the 4 focus groups, we have completed those. The last one was at the end of October. Our consultant Zephyr Collaboration is compiling all the information from those sessions, as well as the surveys to develop a report. Our next set of steps will be to complete that report on survey results and focus group outcomes, and then share that back out primarily with those who participated initially in our focus groups, and then broadening that to the larger community. We're also talking about a series of workshops that we would do in December, January, and possibly February, really starting with our focus group attendees, but then broadening again the invites to the broader community. One, to report back out on the survey results themselves. Some of the preliminary information was provided, but there's way more information that needed to be sorted through, and additional, I think, detail that our consultant would like to share with the community, as well as some of the focus group outcomes. And then we'd also like to spend some time, because our focus groups really started moving in this direction, and we got a lot of the same feedback in the focus groups on solutions. What can we do? What has the county been doing? You heard a lot about that this evening, but more can we do? How can we prepare ourselves for the winter? How can we address a lot of the issues that came up and concerns that were expressed to Cindy and others over the course of the summer, and get ahead of that this year and work in partnership with various county departments as well as other agencies, which has been critical to our ability to address some of these things or problem solve around the issues that the community has pointed out. So there will be ongoing communication, we hope, with community members, leaders, and others. So again, the idea behind this is not only to create a forum for constructive dialogue around these issues, but to develop some long-term partnerships with members of the community, with different organizations that we can rely on and refer to as we try to address some of these issues in the long term, because we all realize, and we especially realize, that these are issues that in many cases have been there before COVID, were highlighted by COVID, and may continue into the future. And so we want to stay very focused and diligent about dealing with those. So in particular, as I mentioned earlier, some of the issues around trash and litter, some of the short-term rental concerns that have been addressed, which were talked about a bit earlier, tourism and COVID, making sure that the community, there's a balance between supporting our business community and ensuring that people feel safe as well. So that is what we're working on now. We're in the middle of the process. We thought it was important to share it with you, and we'll definitely be broadening our outreach as part of this process to many of you, if not all of you, on this call this evening, so that you have an opportunity to participate in the short-term part of the process. And then again, we believe that this will have long-standing results that we can rely on to help us solve some of these issues that many of you have shared with us over the last several months. And with that, I know I have monopolized the presentation, so I wanted to offer Jeffrey Hentz with the Resort Association. They've been a critical partner in this with us in designing this and meeting weekly with Zephyr Collaboration, meeting with Cindy and others to make sure that we're developing a process that will be effective and help us all achieve our goals and really foster that strong sense of community and foundation that we believe we need to really work through a lot of these issues into the future. So Jeff, is there anything that I have not covered that you would like to add to the presentation?
Well, I think you did a great job, Erin, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this great event that Supervisor Gustafson is hosting tonight. I want to say it's amazing what the county has done, led by Supervisor Gustafson, and all the hard work you've put into this collaborative with Zephyr. It's not common around the country, and I think the way the county has stepped up to meet these issues is just been phenomenal. And for us to be invited to be part of it is rewarding. It's very helpful for me in learning this community, knowing that I'm a newbie, but we're thrilled to be part of it. And I think what's exciting is to see the enthusiasm and the passion from our local residents for our destination, our community, and how that's coming through in the discussions and the issues that we're going to tackle together and make us stronger together. I think some of the things coming out of this in our first 4 workshops with the various groups was the thirst for data and how important that is, and the need and want to understand how our community and what feeds our community and how it's structured and get the full picture. And knowing that our organization, NLTRA, is moving quicker to get even more important visitor data so we can better understand what we're dealing with, and having the ability to share that with Placer County and all of our agency partners around the basin, that we'll be able to share that with our community residents so we can all get smarter about what we have in our community and how we can best manage that. And so I just want to tip my hat and thank the county and everything that Supervisor Gustafson and you do in this effort, and how we're just thrilled to be part of it and continue to work forward to the next step and the multiple steps as part of this collaborative. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, for that. And I will add for those on the call that many of the participants have included our agency partners, so community members and agency partners, because they are also very critical to our response and a lot of the issues that, again, have been raised. Without that partnership, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to be as effective. And so we want to continue to leverage those partnerships and build and grow those partnerships. And so we believe that this process gives us the opportunity to do that. I do see a question in the window, and Judy, I don't know if you'd like me to just go ahead and start to address that. as part of this. So enforcement of COVID related things. So, you know, and I will say that, so there have been a couple things related to that on the enforcement. Enforcement of COVID related items is a pretty broad category of items, right? You've got businesses that are supposed to operate a certain way. So what has the county done? Let's start there. Initially with COVID, in terms of businesses that were allowed to operate and to what extent. We spent a lot of time providing guidance from the state, but then really developing guidance that would help businesses understand what was needed, what was required in order for them to operate under the restrictions tied to COVID. The Resort Association was also a huge partner in working with the business community to provide feedback at the state level, but then also develop their own guidelines in order to demonstrate to the community as well as to the state that our businesses were taking coronavirus very seriously and were working diligently to ensure that they had measures in place to operate safely, which means reducing occupancy, requiring face coverings, physical distancing. So really amending their operations in order to ensure that level of safety. And again, working with the Resort Association to develop those protocols and then to share those at the state level. One, to help other businesses learn from what we were doing, and then also to advocate for more clarity at the state level on the business side. So that's just one example. Some of the other things that really I know have come up a lot include enforcing masks and physical distancing. We do and have worked with our county sheriff's office on that. And I think Cindy could definitely speak to this in terms of their interest and willingness in enforcing that. As many of you have probably read, there are several law enforcement agencies throughout the state of California and certainly even nationally that took a pretty strong stance against face coverings and physical distancing and making sure that if people were congregating or gathering that they were from the same household. So there was a resistance on the law enforcement side, depending on the community you reside in doing that. And I know that our supervisor worked very hard to encourage and work with the sheriff's office to get them to, at a minimum, provide education to the community. I think there was some success on that front, but the enforcement side was definitely a challenge and something that we know continues to be a challenge and something that we'll be working with the sheriff's office on. One thing that we did do was we worked to ban alcohol on the Truckee River. It was sort of an indirect way to engage law enforcement, but also try to minimize or reduce the gatherings that were taking place along the Truckee River because it seemed that in many cases there was alcohol involved in that. And so hoping that would maybe change behavior on the river, and then putting out signage, as I'm sure all of you saw along 89, portable message boards and whatnot, really trying to take the education approach as best we could so that people understood what the community norms were on that front. I could really spend a lot of time talking about this, but I know that's the main one that a lot of people have questions about in terms of enforcement. Cindy, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, because I feel like—
Sure. You know, yeah, early on, as it relates to enforcement, it was actually before the governor ordered a statewide face mask campaign that Resort Association came to me along with our community partners. We requested an order from our health officer at that time, Dr. Sisson, to order face coverings for Eastern Placer County because we were united as both a business community and as our community members. Unfortunately, at that time, health officers across the state were receiving threats and maybe still are. Certainly supervisors were and are. and they were, and she was reluctant to do that. Fortunately, I think it was only 2 or 3 days later, the governor came out and ordered them and kind of took it out of our hands. But in the dialogue, we've also had a number of conversations with our sheriff. He is an independently elected official, so what the he has to implement the rules and the laws the way he sees fit. He, in concurrence with our DA, our district attorney, felt that there was not sufficient legal grounds to cite people. And so we asked to please educate people and to actually help us distribute on some of the free PPE days. We asked if they could help join us and, not just listen to Aaron and I as we passed out face coverings, but having some uniforms out there. But, I would say overall in Eastern Placer County, we are incredible. I mean, I really don't see the sorts of, I know people are concerned every time they see somebody on a trail without a face covering, but compared to other areas of the county where people have businesses that aren't requiring face coverings, people wear them below their chins. There's a real rebellion in other parts of our county about wearing face coverings. And up here, I see so much respect by our visitors, our locals, our business owners. So I'm really encouraged that people up here take our health seriously, maybe more so than other areas, and certainly seem to be much more in tune with being respectful of each other. And we haven't had the kinds of rebellion that we're hearing about in other parts of our county. It's pretty amazing. So as far as that goes, yes, the sheriff is an independently elected official and he has to make his own determinations of where his officers spend their time and energy in enforcement activities. We do not have a penalty or a citing ability, a dollar amount fine that the Board of Supervisors, I doubt we would get 3 votes to do anything like that. So it's not just on his back. I don't think we have 3 votes on the board to cite folks for that. But the good news is I don't think that's as big an issue up here as it is in other parts of the state or even the county. And then as it relates to the number, I think Kevin also is asking how many tickets, how many actions. Boy, I would have to ask, we'd have to do a report on that from the county level. I have no idea how many citations have been issued for parking and parking infractions and other issues. So we'd have to get back.
We'd have to get back, and then we could talk with CHP because they were also involved in ticketing in certain areas as well during the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I would add, there's such a broad range of issues here. And I think that even on the short-term rental side, there's been a lot of work on our code enforcement side of things where they've done a lot as well over the year and continue to do more, And so when you talk about reporting out what has been, where the citations been, where, again, it's fairly broad, and that's something that we could definitely try to pull together. But I just wanted to add that in. That's another area where we've been receiving a lot of feedback, and our code enforcement department has been really taking that feedback seriously and making changes as a result in terms of the approach and staffing and everything else. So that would be another area potentially to report back on. And then I do notice that there's a question from Kevin about the Resort Association requiring face coverings as a condition of service. But then also, how does the Resort Association feel about COVID-19? And I have a lengthy response I can provide just based on my familiarity with the organization, but I'll hand this one off to you, Jeff. And perhaps you could even share with the group the PPE giveaway day that you all are leading tomorrow as well.
Certainly. Well, obviously, we're a huge proponent of wearing a mask, as Supervisor Gustafson said. We don't think we have a problem here. We actually think we're leading the state in how we are pushing for and supporting wearing masks. So much so that we invested a lot of time and effort to create a campaign called Mask Up Tahoe that we brought in and utilized a number of key community influencers and residents to be part of that campaign on how important Mask Up was. And the campaign has been so successful. It's everywhere that we are consumer facing. Anybody that's looking at North Lake Tahoe will see the Mask Up messaging. And we continue to emphasize that on safe and responsible travel here and masking up when coming to North Lake Tahoe. You mentioned PPE. Yes, we led the way in bringing PPE here to our community and getting it out to our businesses. So once the reopening started to happen, our businesses were ready with the proper PPE, and with the partnership and support of the county, that's only tripled in terms of how much PPE we're bringing into our community and getting it out to our business community and our nonprofit organizations, so we can get it out into the residential community. We've held a number of free PPE days where we invite the businesses to come to load up their cars with PPE for the businesses, and we're doing that again tomorrow. In the snow and ice, we're going to be out distributing PPE both in Kings Beach and in Tahoe City at the old firehouse to make sure that our business community is ramped up and ready to go for the next several weeks. And that's an effort that we're going to continue to support and be a leader in.
And Jeff, maybe you could just speak briefly to some of the modifications that you made as an organization to your marketing strategy.
Absolutely. Immediately upon the change in mid-March, when the reality sunk in, we paused our marketing immediately, which was right around probably March 15th. We were in the middle portion of our big winter snow push, and we paused all marketing and continued to pause our marketing and transitioned into a messaging of love us from afar, love North Lake Tahoe from afar, and not promoting or advertising or marketing for consumers to come visit us. And then we also created a media-facing campaign to help emphasize that message through the media around the United States and specifically in California, to get the media to become our partner in getting that message across to residents that stay home. This is not the time to come to North Lake Tahoe. When that time is right, the governor will certainly make that announcement, and will certainly advise our residents. So we continue to make the transition into messaging safe and responsible travel. We know we can't keep people from coming here. We're not marketing them to come here, but what we are telling them, if they're coming here now, to be prepared to travel safe and act responsible here in the community and mask up. And we've gone into also a very strong destination management mode versus a marketing mode. That's what our organization is really adding, that critical layer to North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. So hopefully I shared that information. Anything I missed, Aaron?
I think that's a great summary. So thank you, Jeff. I think if anyone would like further clarification, feel free to chat something in the chat or raise your hand.
Sure.
I think that's a great.
Chris's hand has been up for a while, so let's unmute Chris.
Great.
Am I here?
Yep.
Great. Thanks to everyone for being here this evening. I'm a social scientist, and I just wanted to wave a little flag of caution as it concerned the survey. So Jeff mentioned the importance of data and how data-driven people can be and want to be, which I think is fantastic. I happen to know that the survey was distributed, or the link for the survey was distributed through a resort association email a couple weeks prior to the distribution through a District 5 notice, a newsletter. And that raised some concerns to me about who's filling out the survey. And it doesn't just concern that contrast, but in general, who's filling out the survey. So I just want to, kind of make explicit, especially moving forward, the importance and value of getting everyone's opinion and everyone's take on this. So as you have groups moving forward, December, January, February, like you were mentioning, Aaron, it's really important to get everyone's opinion on this in order to have a representative sample. And I think that's really invaluable. So I encourage you strongly to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate that feedback. And just so you know, and I realize that these are distribution lists that we have in the county as well, but I have a handful of distribution lists from people who have in the community that have attended public meetings in the past on a variety of issues, to people who've expressed interest in tracking certain projects. And so it's a fairly robust distribution list of community members. And so I did, there were a number of lists used. That said, I think the more people and the broader audience you have in responding to surveys is better. So I appreciate that feedback. So thank you.
And what you say is absolutely correct from, the science side, right? More people, the broader distribution. And, maybe one thing to do would be to compare the demographics of survey respondents to residents at large in the community to really see if you have a representative sample.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and at some point we'll definitely be reporting those survey results out. I think what you'll find is a lot of the concerns that many of you have heard of or maybe even have yourself were reflected in those survey responses. So
yeah, and let me just correct it too, Erin, because I don't think the intent ever by Zephyr Collaborative was to come up with a data-driven survey. It was more to test, give people an opportunity to weigh in on their concerns if we hadn't already heard them. So I don't think we're drawing conclusions based on percentages that said this or percentages that said that, Chris. So I completely understand that it was not a scientific or database survey from what I saw. It was, just really whoever felt like filling it out did. Not like polling or other types of voter information surveys that are done on a much more technical basis. So hopefully when you see the results, you'll see that it really is just trying to gather all the comments that possibly are out there, and then how do we address those, and not judging them against each other or which has more votes or not. I mean, that information will get tabulated, but I don't think we're using it to make any decisions in that regard.
Right. And as I said, I think many of you would see the concerns that you have or whatnot reflected in that survey.
Yeah.
We heard a lot of the things that I know Cindy's been hearing about all summer long in that survey in a big way.
Yeah.
So there were no surprises to us. So you're right, Cindy, it's not a data-driven survey per se, but it was a data point for us to really try and understand the issues and make sure that there weren't additional issues that we weren't hearing about that were out there for people. And in some cases that definitely occurred. And then also soliciting ideas around solutions. And we got a few good ones. So, I think, we're putting our heads together with our partners, but there are many people in the community that spend some time thinking about this as well and had some great thoughts for us. So it was a really good, comprehensive, I guess, overview of those things. But I appreciate the feedback, understand where you're coming from for sure. And we look forward to sharing that information out to the broader community, as well as our next steps and specific dates tied to that. So.
Yeah, how we're going to use it, I think, and the context behind it would help Chris a lot, and others who might have the same concern.
Yep, absolutely.
So we have one more question from Kevin, and then I'm going to wrap up this topic. There's two more quick questions for Crystal, and it's getting late, so we're going to move forward. But Kevin asks if masks will be required on the mountain. NLTRA, I think he means North Tahoe, resorts refuse service if people decline to wear masks, not the Resort Association. Aaron, the mailing list seem like they suffer from potentially different sampling bias as well.
I can quick jump in on the discussion of the mountain in our ski resorts. We held a sneak peek snow season back in September with all of our ski operators and our business community to give a preview of what to expect this winter. And we know it's going to be vastly different from other winters in the past. But all the ski operators have reported that masks will be expected and required on the slopes. But since the slopes are going to be very capacity controlled, so we're pleased with the incredible amount of safety that they're putting in place and the capacity controls, as well as mandating the mask up. So yes, Our mountains are going to be supporting that. Our ski operators are going to be supporting that. And our organization, obviously, we're partners. We're not the organization that enforces those things. We communicate what the expectations are. And we're putting together a winter play responsible in North Lake Tahoe document that's going to be both a digital document as well as a hard collateral document that will be distributed to those visitors coming to visit our destination during the winter, so that they know what to expect and how to plan.
Thanks, Jeff. We have
Sure.
2 quick questions for Crystal, I think. One is from Ann Nichols. What's the status of the Clark project in Kings Beach? How much money do they have to hold up the development site? When is the estimated close of escrow with the county?
You know, I'm not able to answer that question, Anne. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to check into that project. And I'm wondering if maybe you could, I could email you. I still have your email address. So I'm happy to put that on my to-do list and get the information to you, Anne. Get back to you on that.
So, and then also a question, I hear there's a low income project that's going to be built on the corner of 28 and Chipmunk. Can you confirm it? What's the timeline and size?
I don't know that that's a low income project. If it's the one I'm thinking about it, I thought it was a mixed use project. And that's another one that came from Anne as well. Is that right?
No, that came from Carmen Liparelli.
Okay. Yeah, that's another one I'll have to check into, but I don't think that's I don't think that's an affordable housing project, but I can check on that too.
Okay.
I think it's mixed use.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Gustafson, do you want to wrap up?
Well, I want to thank everybody for participating tonight, and especially thanking all the staff who've been working. We routinely, I ask the other supervisors, do you have this much community engagement and number of questions and emails? And I can assure you none of them do. We may be small, but we are mighty in our public involvement in Eastern Placer. So I really, and we have a lot going on as well, and a lot of issues underway. And I really appreciate people getting involved and being able to hold these forums. We have had challenges with consistency. We don't have an agreement between all the board members on how max and if max should meet. There's 13 municipal advisory committees throughout the county. And so some meetings are being held to understand if we're going to reconvene max and under what protocols for voting and Brown Act and all of those things. So in the meantime, we went ahead and started thinking that town halls might be the right way to go in the short term while the board continues to talk about this, because there is a lot going on. And I know you can't track all the meetings because I can barely keep up with the agenda packets and meetings I'm supposed to go to, and barely remember to report it all to you. So short of having a local newspaper again, my own bias, when we used to have a local newspaper, the Tahoe World, who attended meetings and gave the community a good description of what was happening, the burden kind of falls on us to get the word out and really keep you informed. And so I'm trying to do that through a variety of mechanisms, always open to new suggestions. But I think town halls will be the way, at least through the end of the year, especially as we go into further, both into the holidays, but also into the shutdowns with COVID. So thank you for participating this way virtually. We actually had more people attending tonight than we've had at a MAC meeting in a very, very long time. If we combined all the MACs, we wouldn't have had this many in a meeting, prior to COVID. So I really appreciate, and hopefully this is a good format for all of you to help us get the word out, and we can gain even how we publicize these and what lists we get these agendas out to, so more people are aware of the opportunity to sit in and listen. Of course, you're always open to any of the other public meetings and to attend those, but I realize most of you have more worthwhile things to do with your time than go to a million meetings. And so thank you. And thanks to staff for doing an incredible job up here on a lot of issues and being so responsive to all of the concerns in North Tahoe. With that, Judy, I think we
I
can
think
scan
we're
over.
done. We're just trying to send some phone numbers and emails back and forth, so we'll stay on for just a second. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for participating in what was great topics, lively conversation, and it's greatly appreciated. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you,
Thank
Judy.
you.
Bye, everyone.